So welcome. This morning we will be creating a rock solid business plan for 2023. It's the middle of January. We've still got time. Don't worry. We've got almost 12 months of the year and it's a great time to be planning for our businesses. And I will be taking you through some of that process today. So welcome. I'm Emma Mills-Sheffield and I'm excited to welcome you to this brand new webinar series. This has been brought to you by eBay and Small Business Britain. So I'm Emma from Mind Setup, and I'm an independent strategic business consultant, and I focus on helping small and scaling businesses on their growth journey. Today's session on business planning is the first in a jam-packed schedule, which has been carefully curated to support small businesses, wherever you are along your journey. We'll be sharing more details on upcoming events later in the webinar too. But before we get started, I'd just like to say that the advice and any opinions that I share today in this session are my own. They're not necessarily reflective of the views or positions of eBay or Small Business Britain. In terms of a little bit of housekeeping, the chat function is turned off because we're expecting a lot of attendees today, but you can ask questions in the Q&A box, which you should see at the top of your screen. The eBay team will monitor this, and they will raise some of these questions as we go throughout after sort of each section, and then we'll have a big Q&A part at the end. If you like closed captions, you can also set that up on your own view as well. And then the recording will be made available separately, and that will have transcription too. So let's kick off. So today we're going to cover goals, purpose, mission, and vision, which helps with your strategic direction. Also, what goes into a business plan, looking at current and future opportunities, understanding your finances, business, data, and monitoring progress, getting clear on your value proposition, getting your business strategy on a page, and having the importance of having a backup plan, and then obviously into Q&A. We've got loads in this session today, so please do get your questions into the chat, into the Q&A box, and we'll come to them as we can. And also, if you have any queries at the moment about any of the terminology I've just used, don't worry, we're going to cover everything in each section and also demystify some terminology, as I'm conscious that we have lots of different sort of levels of maturity of business here today, and you might be literally just starting out, or you could well be well on your way and have a very, a larger business. Your goals, vision, and values. Goals, purpose, vision, and mission. As we run through this workshop today, there will be lots of templates that will pop up. What I'll do is I'll point you to a template if I think it'd be useful to just give you an overview. Then you can get these all as a PDF after the session anyway. There are one or two exercises that we're going to be doing today throughout the session, but they are super simple. So it doesn't matter that you haven't got the template. You're just going to be literally scribbling on a page. But today I want to just kind of open up with the big starting point. Why do we do what we do? Because when you get really, really busy in business or you're stressed, it's quite hard to remember why we even started it in the first place. So starting from scratch, let's go from the goals. What are your long and short-term goals for you and your business? Maybe it's an income-driven goal. Maybe it's about balance, that you want to work for yourself and have enough time to do other things. So it could be anything. But do think about maybe what does 3 years' time look like for you if everything works out well, and then in 2 years, and then in a year. So that way you can break it down into more manageable chunks, especially when you look at monthly targets. The big question, the why. You define why you do what you do. What's the kind of higher purpose or cause that you serve? It's a guiding star, always pursued but never reached, and it's very aspirational. And I'll be honest, it can be super hard to do this if you are in, I'd say, a very standard business. It's much easier if you're in a charity or community interest company, because you've kind of got that very clear North Star. In a business, it's a little harder. Let me give you an example where maybe your purpose and the reason you've gone into business is because you want to reduce the amount of fast fashion clothing items which get made and then disposed of in landfill. So you have a really kind of big sustainable purpose in your business and at the core of what you do. So you want to do something really big on the sustainability scale. What you do, the vision, is what you aspire to achieve, and you kind of paint a picture of the future if your organization is successful. And so in this example, the vision could be maybe that you want to support job creation in a developing country, only selling clothing made from recycled fibers that then can be recycled again, and that you have they're ethically sourced and the wages are good, and it's very much a community-driven sort of aim as well. So that kind of ties in with the purpose. And then the how do you do it, the mission. This is starting to go down into your business plan now. And the mission here is that maybe you only source ethically produced products with a clear view of the supply chain and they have full sustainability credentials. And on a practical level, how do you pull that into your business? Well, maybe you're only going to focus on selling t-shirts in the first instance to get the message of your brand out there and to start to build a loyal following. So it kind of goes from the big down to the practical. And if I show you the next slide, this is what the template will look like. So you can spend some time, because it's not something we can do in a workshop online now, because you need to sort of sit and think, go out for a walk, think about why you do what you do and what you want your goals to be. So you'll get this template afterwards. And another exercise is on the right. That wheel that you can see has got like a confidence score on it. So 1 or 0 is not confident at all, 1 ever so slightly, all the way up to 5 is very confident. And this is something to fill in as well. How confident are you about the goals that you're setting, about the audience that you sell to, about your marketing strategy, revenue streams, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and your value proposition? And as I said, we'll describe what these are in more detail throughout the session. So don't worry if right now you're thinking, I don't know what a value proposition is, because we will get there. But again, this is a good question to ask yourself and also revisit in 3 months and 6 months again. Because if you realize that you're really low in confidence on the audience and the marketing, then that's where you need to start focusing. It's easy as a business owner to try and do absolutely everything all at the same time, but it doesn't work out that well. So we need to focus on what we can do in order and how we can start to make progress quite sensibly. So let's look at what goes into a business plan. It's kind of I always address this with 2 different strands, because some people get a little bit worried that a business plan has to be 20 pages, 50 pages, absolutely huge, full of spreadsheets and financials and everything. At a minimum, try and just do it on a page or 2. You need to have on the left, in sort of whatever form, whether you have a couple of sentences or a whole page, that's up to you, an overview of why your business exists. So it kind of goes back to the purpose, the why, the how and the what. What's your marketing strategy? So that needs to be laid out clearly. How are you selling? Your audience, who are you selling to? What channels do you use? And then into the financials. So what revenue do you generate? Where does your money come from? And what are your income streams? Is it services as well as products, or is it purely product driven, but you've got about 6 or 8 different types of products? Market analysis summary. So who else is doing what you're doing? Who's out there? Who are your competitors? Who buys from you? You know, who are the markets that you haven't gone into yet, different age groups or locations potentially? If you have a team, then what are the roles and responsibilities of your team? What's the management structure? What's that kind of operational support? Maybe you've got HR, you've got marketing, so on. Maybe you outsource your marketing, or typically none of the above, it's just you, but it's good for you to split out what you do where, so you can actually see in the future when you grow how you want to start outsourcing or employing somebody to take over certain elements. And then lastly, an overview of the services or products that you sell. And then in the nice to have bucket, This is where you go into more detail. So if you're looking to maybe get a bank loan or a grant, you might want to add in a bit more information about your supply chain. Is it very resilient? Do you have lots of suppliers for your materials, or are you overly reliant on just one? Therefore, you're reliant on their pricing structure only. That you've got any partners or collaborators that you work with, put some information in about that. And then more detail on the marketing plan and detailed market analysis. Any funding or investment information. So if you're looking at developing something in stages, how much money do you need per stage? And your KPIs. And I'm going to do acronyms later, but this one is key performance indicators. So it might be sales targets. It could be something like that you want to add in. And then way more into the financials, financial forecasting, maybe scenario modeling. This is where you start to look at, what would happen if, and you might model out 2 or 3 different things. So if you were able to buy your materials in bulk, it cost you a lot more upfront, but actually your item cost would be much lower. So if you could get £10,000 to buy much more material, potentially it would increase your profitability over time. And then lastly, products and services, but with a timeline if you're developing something, if it's new. So if you get your £10,000, it means you can also hire somebody in to help you, produce these t-shirts. And so you might be able to launch them by April. So the nice to haves are good to know about, and you may choose to use some, but typically spend your time on the left-hand column. That's all you need to do as a small business owner, especially in the early stages. Any questions, pop them in a Q&A. We'll be coming back to those at the end of this section, if we have time to address a few of those. Now, this is a really useful on-a-page view of what a business plan might be. I'm not going to go into audience personas and marketing beyond what's written here, because there are separate webinars coming up on those. I'll leave the experts to do that section. I'll just talk around the other 4. So in your business plan, again, we've got that goal setting piece. Where do you want to be? What revenue do you want to generate in X amount of time? Why does your business exist? That's the kind of the story piece. That's the passion piece. And then you put in vision, mission, values, and so on. With revenue streams, how do people spend with you? Do they buy on eBay? Do they buy in a physical shop? Do they place an order? You take a deposit, produce it, they pay the balance. Just thinking about where your money comes into the system, and also that helps you with your cash flow. Looking at fixed and variable costs too. And again, we'll cover that in a bit more detail, because once we understand where the figures are coming from, what figures we're dealing with in the business, it's much easier to understand profitability, where potentially you can put a sale or a special offer in, or where you have to increase your prices. Today, we'll do a little exercise on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And lastly, your value proposition. So what do people know you for? What sets you apart, and why do people buy from you? What is your USP, which is your unique selling point? You can even have an emotional selling point. It's kind of really targeting why people see you above all other providers and come to you. Then you have to go shouting about it. So you need to tell the story of what you do and what benefit it has in your marketing, because you need to be getting proof. Do you have case studies of people using your products? Do you have reviews? Do you have any testimonials and quotes? Anything that you can take as a snippet and you can start to push through your social media starts to build trust in you as a supplier. The template that you'll see when it comes out will look like this, nice and jazzy. So you can add in some key actions. You might decide that you need to work on goal setting and the SWOT analysis and put the key points in here. And then the audience personas and marketing, you might have a view now. If not, you can fill it in when you've maybe attended the marketing webinars that are coming up. So again, that's a good exercise to get that background kind of thinking and research piece done before you go into making the plan. So SWOT analysis. This is sitting back and being really critical and sort of honest with yourself and your business. So we have got strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths are very much internal. So what is it you do well? You'll know that. It can be quite hard to think of a few things because we always focus on what isn't going so well when we run a business. But we then have the weaknesses. Where do you need to improve? You want to resolve and reduce these. It could be that actually IT is just not your strong point at all, and it's not something you want to do. So we've also got here the opportunities, where you want to exploit and expand them. This is where you've got trends and gaps in the market, turning your strengths into an opportunity. And then we have on the bottom right, the threats. So what do you need to avoid or overcome? This could be competitor edge. It could be external market influence or obstacles. At the moment, talk of the cost of living is, I think, at the top of everyone's minds. And so how can you compete with others on price? Or maybe you don't compete on price. Perhaps you compete with providing brilliant customer service and really high quality. Perhaps that's the best focus for you. What I'm going to do is suggest that you, if you've got a piece of paper, literally draw across, and you've got 4 sections. Start listing a few strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, this is quite a big exercise, but just for a few minutes, just start to get those thought processes going. And what I'm going to do as you do that is just look through some of the questions that have come in, and I'll just address those. So feel free to either fill this in, or you might listen to the questions. I'll leave you in silence for a moment and I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm going to answer a few questions here as we go. So I will talk about business planning, but do feel free to carry on with the SWOT analysis piece if you like as well. So I've got a question here about how often you would update your business plan. I would say you may want to update it every 3 months, potentially every 6, but absolutely refer to it on a monthly basis. It's really easy to set big goals for a year's time. We then don't look at the progress we're making. And so you then get to month 11 and think, okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to hit my targets. So it's a good idea to review every single month. It means you can adjust. And as the polling question showed, most of you are flexible to what your customers are buying. So that is where you really need to think about, okay, this product line was not selling at all. What am I going to do about it? Maybe promote it, reduce the price, take it offline for a bit. How do you want to kind of address that area? Look at it monthly. See it as your kind of GPS. So if an aeroplane has to go from London to New York, if it goes half a degree off, by the time it gets to New York, it's not going to be there at all. It's probably going to be down in Brazil. You need to just adjust all the time. So if you always adjust things incrementally, you'll be in a much better position to actually reach the target you want to get to. A question about how do we respond to market factors beyond our control? That's a really interesting one, because if we think about the circle of concern and control, we cannot control the energy prices, just something we cannot do. Maybe what we can control is looking at our supply chain and potentially, can we get a better deal? Can we maybe reduce the costs on that? It's about understanding what you can control versus what you can't, and really focusing on those areas, because otherwise we get very worried about everything else that we can't address. How do you create a business plan for a business you've yet to start up? It's a great question. Have a go, is what I would say. Have a go at what you think a good business would look like for you in 6 or 12 months and kind of model it backwards from that point. Then you can just keep adjusting it. So you want to adjust it much more often, but it still gives you something to have a go at. Another question, do we follow a 30, 60, 90-day goal setting in your plan? You absolutely can. I set monthly targets in my plans. So it might be around networking opportunities, because if I don't sell products directly, how do I know what's selling? Well, what I do know is to build a pipeline, I'm going to need to be meeting people, having conversations, sending out a proposal. So if I make sure I go to 2 networking events a month and have 4 one-to-one conversations, that will ultimately play out into building my pipeline. So I'll do one more question and then we will move on. So using a business model canvas, would it help? Now, some of you may have heard of business model canvas. It is good to get everything on a page. And yes, it can help. What I tend to do is I focus on business planning in going deeper into some of those areas, so into the more kind of practical. That's everything on a page. And it does talk about what channels you use and what partners and that sort of thing. But then you do need to go down into the detail. Okay, let's move on and I'll come back to some of those questions as we go because we've got lots coming in, which is great. Right, this is a good jazzy slide for you. This is the ANSOF matrix, which covers product and market expansion. It's a strategic planning tool that provides a framework where businesses can devise strategies for future growth. Sounds a bit lofty. I'll explain it, don't worry. It is a concept where we can basically offer products / services into markets. And so we have existing and we have new. Bottom left, you can penetrate the market more. It's the lowest risk. So these are existing products or services selling to existing markets, basically. That's kind of what you do already, but can you just go a bit deeper? You can move to the right and develop a new product or service for the same market, so the same customers or clients. And so you've already got an in with them. You've already built their trust. And it's easier to then say, well, you already know me for doing this. I also now sell this. And so you can kind of go into that space, and it's fairly low risk as well. Top left, you've got market development. Same products or services, but a new market. It might be a new location, it might be a new demographic. But how do you then sort of penetrate that particular market with with your marketing strategy? And then top right, this is diversification. Brand new products or services into a brand new market. It's the highest risk and will take the highest investment, possibly got the highest reward. So when you're thinking about what to do next, it's worth just looking at this kind of matrix and saying, well, where do I sit across this? It might be better to keep, the investment lower and just penetrate the market more rather than developing a new product. So that should give you some overview as to how to do this. Okay. And this is an exercise you can do afterwards. I'm a big fan of sticky notes, I have to say. You can also use them on digitally, so don't worry if you don't want to use paper. Always good not to waste it if possible. And if you have a team, you can use something like Miro online, and you can put the sticky notes on and move them around digitally. But this is about narrowing down the options because, again, as business owners, we have so many ideas and we think often we have to compete with others. And I'll give you an example. When I was looking at developing online training and a program to deliver and sell. And I thought, everybody needs this. I have to do it. Everyone's doing this. It was during COVID. Must do a course. And after much umming and ahhing, I realized, and actually the advice of a very good mentor of mine, that the work it was going to take to put in, the effort it was going to take on my part when I could be doing something else, was disproportionately high to the return that I was going to get on it. And once I realized that, I thought, great, I've actually given myself permission not to do something. And it was a massive relief, because I felt I had to compete with others and I had to do something in the market that everybody else was doing just to keep up. And actually, I didn't go back to what my core sort of USP is, and running a course was not what I needed to do. So this is the equivalent of that, is getting all of your ideas out on paper, mapping them again to low to high potential or growth for your business, and then low to high risk and cost. So to give you a bit of a narrative around this, I'm going to pick 3 of these. Let's say you want to take a physical lease on a shop, a 12-month lease, because your business on eBay is doing brilliantly. In general, it's good, but you think actually now's the time to break into, having a retail space. Potentially really high growth, but also really high risk or cost. So you've got that monthly payment to make. You've got to fit the shop out. You've got to drive the marketing. You have to get people through the door. So it sits very, very top right. Somewhere you might think of starting, though, is further to the left, which is still high potential and growth, but much lower on the risk and cost. And that's renting a space at a local seasonal market. So just to test the market and see what people want to buy. And then if you want to take a lease at an art studio, because in your shop you're selling pottery or jewelry, bottom right, you'll see taking a permanent lease at an art studio. Very high risk or cost, but actually very low growth and potential. So just picking those 3, you can kind of see how they all differ. And then what you do with these is absolutely up to you. There is no right or wrong, but it's for you to decide. Actually, the biggest thing I'm going to focus on for the next few months is getting that space in a seasonal market, get e-commerce on the website, and increase my prices by 10%. That's kind of where I am, because it's fairly low risk, but actually high growth. When you get the templates, you'll see this, which is literally an empty version. So you can start narrowing down the options and looking at your growth potential. So I hope that's helpful. It's a good way of approaching sort of what ideas are out there and what you might want to do. And then thinking about, I'm just going to pick a few, rather than going crazy saying I have to do all of these different things. Just going to do 1 or 2 things to start with. Okay, so let's look at your finances, business data and monitoring. Before I do that, I'm going to answer another couple of questions. We've got a question here, and I think this is also because I've got some service questions versus products around business planning. So as a service provider, networking is really important, and understanding, say, market analysis. Who's prepared to buy from you? And I say buy loosely, because in services, it's more about building trust and delivery than it is just, buying a one-off. In terms of market analysis, it can be hard to find, because competitors won't necessarily help or share information. But generally in services, everybody's a bit different. So even if you've got two physiotherapists, well, a lot of people need physiotherapy services. One person isn't going to be able to serve everybody. So there is enough to go around. And you might find one of you is a sport physio and one is general. And so actually, although you do the same thing, you're still slightly different. And so if you do start talking whilst networking, you will start to suss out the market. You won't find that people withhold that much. Also, you can collaborate with other people, even if they're in a similar area. So I wouldn't worry too much about competitors not sharing. You might find some people share all the best stories, No one's going to tell you the worst. So do take everything with a pinch of salt. When you find that people always go, yeah, it's great, yeah, everything's brilliant. Then you see them at absolutely every networking event. And you wonder, well, how have you got time to be out there constantly when you should be delivering? So it's just about understanding really who your audience is and focusing in on them. Deliver brilliant service, get good reviews, build trust, build referrals. That would be my advice there. And another question we have here is just, I've got loads. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with them. This is quite a subjective question here, but or a subjective answer. But how many businesses succeed even though they never set a business plan? The answer to that is going to be really, really vague. You're going to have businesses that succeed with and without a plan, and you're going to have businesses that fail with and without a plan. All I would say is those who do have a plan stand a better chance of at least being honest with themselves and looking to say, if it's not working, I now know I need to do something different, or I need to pull the plug completely. So it can help you to make decisions much faster, for sure. Okay. And lots of questions about USPs. So we'll come to that when we talk about your value proposition as well. And this is a nice question. How can I find inspiration for a new business idea? Sunny day, go for a walk. That sounds really simplistic, I know, but get out, get into the fresh air, start talking to your friends, start looking at maybe putting some questions out on Facebook. You think about what isn't being served in the market already, or what do I need? Because if I need something that isn't out there, I'm already invested in the process of trying to work out what it is. You can come up with ideas that are just random products, and you might develop them, you might buy them in, you might sell them on. That might be okay, but do you have a passion? And so it's quite a good idea to think about, what is it that I need or somebody at home needs that I can't find in the market, and how do I develop that? Because then you have a passion for it. Then you can test it with other people, test the idea. Then you know you've got something that can become a bit more solid. Okay, so let's look at data, finance, measurables, that sort of thing. So 3 acronyms I want to throw into the mix, if anything, just to demystify some of these for you, because it can be a little bit confusing at times. So from a sort of a top-down and strategic level in a business, you may have OKRs, which are objectives and key results. They identify what a desirable outcome is for the business. It could be to increase brand awareness and following on social media. So it's kind of like a high-level objective. And then your key performance indicators are measurable. And this is what it would look like if you said, I want to increase my follower numbers by X% on Instagram, or increase the click-through rate on social media posts by Y%. And then the SLAs, service level agreements. I think less relevant for most businesses, but something I want to put in there because you may hear of those. And this is very service level driven. It could be the time to address a contact, to get back to somebody, a complaint or a ticket raised, very IT driven normally around service levels. So if you say to your customers, I will always get back to you within 24 hours, that's actually an SLA, because if you go much longer than that, they're going to start judging you negatively for it. You should measure what matters in your business. And some of the useful metrics are sales figures, social media engagement, website analytics, customer satisfaction scores, conversion or win rate, and that's a little bit more around that potentially service-led and networking. If I know that I generally win 2 out of 3 proposals, and I need to start speaking to 15 people, because then that should get me 6 proposals. That means I'm going to win 4 projects. You may measure sustainability metrics in your business. And again, anything relevant to your strategy and goals. It's going to be different if you're in professional services versus making and selling jewelry on eBay, for instance. So measure what's relevant, and also eBay data. So I'm just going to cover off a few of those as well. So the eBay data that's available, we've got traffic reports, sales reports, and TerraPeak, and these are all available for eBay sellers. So a lot of data available for you on the Seller Hub that you can use to support your business if you're an eBay seller. And these are only some of the examples, but I do encourage you to go and play around in the Seller Hub and explore what's out there that's relevant for you. In detail then, just to show you some screenshots to know what to expect, is a traffic report. So you can see in detail how much traffic you're getting in total, how it breaks down by listing, where it's coming from, whether it's promoted listings that you're using, or whether it's organic traffic, or even from paid ads, which are offsite. You can see trends over time as well, which is helpful. And also various metrics like whether you're in the top 20 search impression slots, your click-through rate, conversion rate, and so on. I would be looking at, and in answer to one of your questions about having a USP as an eBay seller, I would be looking at this data as a starting point in order to differentiate yourself. So if you're in the top 20, brilliant. Why? So look at your competitors. Who are the other 19? You know, what are they selling? How do they appear on their site? What's their photography like? What's their, you know, postage terms, things like that. So you can start to then look at whether you want to promote any listings or whether you want to just keep it as an organic thing. So that's where I would be looking before you start developing a USP on eBay. And then your sales report in the Sellers Hub. It's been recently changed, so you can see your sales through the last 3 years. So it gives you a longer period to track your sales and seasonality, which is really helpful. You can see various metrics like how many unique buyers you have, what your repeat buyer split is, so who's coming back and returning to your store. And you can see what formats work well for you, how your selling costs break down, as well as further insights about your listings. And then lastly, TerraPeak. So this is the TerraPeak tool, which is under the Research tab. This does some really good stuff too. The product research tool allows you to see what the average selling price is for inventory that you're interested in, whether free postage is the norm or not, what the sell-through rate is, and so on. You can use it to plan your inventory expansion. So when we were looking at the new products and services exercise a few slides ago, this is where it'd be really helpful to understand before you expand into new or larger areas. And if you're a shop subscriber, you get even more powerful data from the Sourcing Insights report. So do go in and have a play. Do see what's available to you because there's lots of information in there. Finances. So if we have the money conversation, a lot of people tend to shy away quite quickly. But we need to understand what our finances are doing in our business. What do people currently buy from you? What are you known for? And again, this template is great to just add rows across it. So what do people currently buy? Maybe it's t-shirts. Let's keep it simple. They just buy t-shirts. And that's what you're known for. Big, bold, graphic print. Your brand's really obvious, and that's really what people come back to you for time and again. But you do want to start moving into a new product range. And so look at what the viability of the new product is under this innovation column. What's the market research? If you sell children's t-shirts, how well are they going to translate into adult equivalents? So start to do your market research, start to see what's out there on eBay, start to see, look online as to who else is selling what you think you want to be doing. And then investment. So what are your investment options for growth? Are you able to just test with a few t-shirts to see how well they sell? Or are you going to have to maybe take a loan, or we'll talk about working capital support in a moment, to be able to grow so you can batch purchase something because you're fairly certain they're all going to sell very quickly because they're very seasonal and you can shift it very quickly. Fixed and variable costs. So these are the two costs that impact your selling price. And they certainly impact your cash flow and the bottom line. Your fixed costs are going to be rent, I would say energy bills, but they're generally variable at the moment. But your other subscriptions online are going to be kind of fixed costs for running a business. Salary costs, generally fairly fixed. But variable costs could be, if you're making jewelry, depends on the materials that you're going to use, silver versus gold versus steel. They're all very, very different. So of course that impacts your selling price. So if you get some clarity on those, you can understand what you should be selling at, which then leads to your profitability. So current profitability, and then the return on investment for new ideas. Something that we don't often build in, and I think this might also answer a question about the wage that you can earn when you run a small business, is that we don't build in our time. So if the piece of jewelry we're making costs, £50 in materials, and we think we're going to sell it for 150, you've got £100 profit. But if it took you 20 hours to make, you're earning £5 an hour and you're not making a profit. So understanding what your wages should be, what your hourly rate should be, should really help you decide whether you want to develop this product or not. And lastly, what external sources do you need to tap into? Are there grants available, or do you want to look at a loan, potentially working capital support, which is another great area. And this is an external source of support you can tap into, and that's the Capital for eBay Business Sellers program that eBay offers to its sellers. It's basically flexible capital financing when you need it, so you can scale when you want. eBay partners with YouLend to offer capital to small and medium-sized business sellers, ranging from £500 to £1 million. And you can use it to grow your business, and it's repaid in line with your eBay sales. It's really quick to apply. You submit an application to YouLend, and they'll let you know whether you've been successful or not. And in the last year, the program's funded £80 million to thousands of small businesses. In the follow-up email that you'll get, that eBay will send around after the webinar, they'll also include more information on this and how you can apply. So that might be an option for something you want to consider too. Now, I promised that I would not just cover a business plan, because as small businesses, we have to juggle everything. I always think it's beneficial to take a step back and balance life with business. I've had a question around whether a business plan adds pressure. This person's always struggled to do one, and they feel it's going to add more pressure that they don't want. Keeping it simple would be my advice. Don't beat yourself up if you don't achieve something on it. It's not a problem. But what it is it does show you what you can achieve and what you should be focusing on. So I would keep it really, really simple until you get used to it and you feel it's kind of working for you, and then you can always develop it. Like I said at the beginning, you don't have to go into a full 20-page plan. Just put it on a page. Those 6 boxes with actions under goals and marketing and revenue, just start with that. Because we can go into our businesses way too deep. And it's still important to balance everything that we have going on. So this is a great exercise to just get honest with ourselves when we start to balance business with the rest of us. And when it comes to the business and money side, be honest. Do you enjoy what you do? Do you manage your finances well? You stick to regular hours, customers and staff are happy, and you're confident about your business future. See this as a health check. So you can kind of almost give yourself a score out of 10, perhaps, or even a yes, no against numbers 1 to 5, and then count them all up and see where you are on the yeses versus the no's. Because if we're really high in some of these areas, it means we might be low in others. So under family and friends, think about your socializing. You socialize with friends away from business. It doesn't interfere with family commitments. Workload at home is fairly shared. You have quality time with family. You've got good quality and supportive relationships. You want to score highly here, because if you're scoring well here, it really helps with everything else. So do spend time focusing on what you need to do to be supported. And equally with health and well-being, do you eat a balanced and healthy diet, exercise well, maybe meditate, journal, reflect, that you look forward to your hobbies, and that you get enough good quality sleep. And then lastly, with social and community. So you engage with others in the community outside of business, and there's always something to help with that you enjoy, but equally don't overcommit. Do you get involved with causes that are important? You build networks around you and you connect with others. And also people know what your boundaries are. So if you're constantly saying yes to taking on something new, maybe think twice about, does it help me with my business goals? Does it help me with my kind of connection with people? Or does it feel like a burden that I've just gone, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it. Because if that's the answer that you're about to give, it starts to chip in at everything else that you do. So do be selfish with your time. Make sure you look after yourself, and you regularly look back on this and think, well, where am I scoring here? Then you can start to have a bit more balance. So now let's look at value propositions. I'll just see if there's any questions. Okay. Here's a question on marketing. Well, a general one, but marketing comes up. So any recommendations of how much of our profit we should reinvest into our business, for instance, into marketing? There's no particular number on that one, I'm afraid, because it's personal. What I would suggest you do is get super clear on the numbers, that you understand what your revenue is, you understand your profitability, and also any trends over time. So you can make a decision on what's comfortable for you to reinvest. If you can get a definite return on investment from your marketing, because you absolutely know if you spend £1,000 on adverts and you get £15,000 of sales, that's okay. What's the profitability on those sales? Well, if it's only £500, you've spent more on advertising than you have on profit. Whereas if the profitability is £400, the return on investments from a profitability perspective is kind of 4 to 1. So you might decide to then reinvest £2,000 in adverts and then £4,000 because it's exponential. But always measure, always track, see what's working. If it's not working, tweak it or stop it. If it is working, keep doing more of it. So I hope that helps. So we're going to talk about our value proposition now, because this will help us to develop that kind of USP. Equally, if we are clear on our value proposition, it also helps us to validate it. And there's nothing better in a small business to think, actually, it's working, I'm doing the right thing. It really helps you too when you're looking at maybe tendering for something or putting together a proposal, or entering into awards, when you're really super clear about who you are, what you do, and who you do it for. A value proposition. So you can work through this exercise and you start by thinking about the problem. So what's the customer's need, challenge, or problem? Potentially it's not being able to get sustainably produced t-shirts because they don't want to be, going down the fast fashion route. The problem they might have is accessing them at a good price point. So that's something that you want to think about, and you decided that you can package them up brilliantly, that your brand speaks for itself, and you can actually charge a higher price. Or potentially you look at, maybe I want to be reducing the price point slightly to be able to sell more. We then look at the impact. So what's the impact of them not solving the problem or addressing the challenge? So if we go back to a services business, physiotherapy, really easy. The challenge is they can't train for a marathon because they've obviously got knee problems. Impact of them not doing it is they don't feel great about it, they can't stay fit, they can't run the marathon, and actually impacts their well-being. So let's look at the solution and product. You've got your sustainable t-shirts, or you've got your sports physio. So I'm addressing a product and a service at the same time there, just so you can see how it flows. The proof is the same across both. So where have you done it well before? Do you have case studies or testimonials? Or maybe on a product side, with your t-shirts, you're going to have reviews. You've got your eBay reviews as well. You might have quotes and comments from people. And that's what you want to start shouting about to everybody. And ultimately, so what? What's the benefit to the customer? To get that longevity and get repeat business, you want to make sure the customer benefits. You want them to tell other people about you, you want them to spread the word, and you want them to come back. So the benefit to the customer of getting the t-shirts that are sustainably produced, potentially, is it taps right back into that initial piece around wanting to do something more sustainable and have a better impact on the planet. With the physio, benefit to the customer becomes fairly obvious that they get better over a period of weeks or months, and they get to train, they get to run the marathon. If your so what isn't very clear, then you might want to think a little bit more about tweaking, going back to what's the problem that they have, because you might not have addressed it fully. Once you do know what it is, it's much easier to fill in this kind of top to bottom approach. You'll also get this as a template. So you can sit quietly, separately, spend some time and look at the needs, challenges and problems, impact, solution, what's the proof and what's the benefit. Okay, let's move on to business strategy. So we're just going to broaden out the planning piece for a moment. But before that, I've just had a question on how to work out cash flow projections in your business plan. You can only understand what you might get by looking backwards. So what have I already earned so far? Track your sales. So if you go back to some of the eBay tools, that's brilliant to see what your sales have been. But even on a rudimentary level, on a spreadsheet, if you don't know what that, you don't access that data often. I say, what have I earned over the past 20 years, 10 years, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, month? Then check for any seasonality. So you might have a bumper month in December and it drops off in January. So if you know that's likely to happen, don't flatten your cash flow out for the year, your forecasting, because you know you have a bumper Christmas. If you have a summer range of products that you sell, maybe you have a bumper July, but then in August it goes quiet when people are away. So you've got those kind of peaks and troughs. Then you can start to model that for next year or this coming year and say, well, if that happened last year, it might happen again this year. I've also got a new product range and I'm promoting that in March. So I'm expecting April sales to also go higher. So you can just start to map it out. Then on a monthly basis, track what has actually happened. Because with the best will in the world, we can say we want to, well, actually, let's go back to 2020. 3 years ago in January, we were probably all having a similar conversation to now. And then when COVID kicked off and obviously the lockdowns happened, business for everybody changed in different ways, for better, for worse, and so on. We couldn't have predicted that. So looking at that past cash flow, it can be a bit of a blip. But equally, if you had a business model or a particular product that sold brilliantly and has carried on doing so, then that becomes part of your standard cash flow and forecasting because you know it always sells. Last question here before I move on is, so I've got two here. Where does the value proposition sit in the business plan? That's a great question. So you can have, you can either have it on a page sort of, at the end, or you keep it as a working document for you just to kind of monitor, what am I doing? Is it working? How do I drive my business story through my marketing. So it doesn't have to necessarily be shown to other people, but it just helps you get that thought process down on paper so you can start to tell the story of what you do, why you do it, how you're different, or even when you're networking, you know, how do you come up with your quick pitch? So that's that's part of it. And with that, your unique selling point or selling proposition, you will be different because you're different to everybody else who sells. So it can feel a little bit hard when you look at things and say, well, we both sell t-shirts. But if you have something, a particular passion, make sure you go back to your passion and your purpose. And that's the bit that you really sell. You sell when you're talking to people in your marketing. So try and just see what's ever so slightly different. And why, if anything, ask your friends, you know, do you like what I do? Why is it different? Why do you come to me and not other people? Ask your customers, see what your reviews are saying, as to whether it's because you offer brilliant customer service or great refund policy, you know, so you'll find something that just makes you a bit different. And then lastly, if your business isn't on eBay, what tools can you use to track your business? Google Analytics for your website, your social media analytics as well. Where are people finding you? How are they engaging? Which platforms? So anything like that, social media, website analytics, and then also things like sign-ups to a newsletter, perhaps. How many people are you managing to get into your pipeline? Okay, so looking at a strategy on a page. So I did tell you this session was jam-packed. There's a lot in this, and I don't expect you to be able to do absolutely every single thing, because not every single thing will be super relevant for each stage of your business. But if you take away 2 or 3 key points and key templates from this workshop, you should get a good overview of sort of areas to make progress. So, business strategy. This is quite a deep subject area. But what I like to do is to just put something on a page. We can have a plan, but we still need to know why we're doing something. And you might decide for the year, this is, let's call it a year's strategy, that the one thing, the main goal you're going to aim for this year is you want to increase sales by 80%, for argument's sake. The reason to put this on a page is you can then start to hang your business plan underneath it. If you put your plan together in isolation from your strategic goal, it means it can sit to one side and you don't quite know why you're doing what you're doing and you're busy doing it. But what impact does it have on your sales figures? It also means you can avoid sometimes having magpie syndrome and going for the next shiny thing, because you can avoid distractions when new ideas come in, because you can look at this and say, but is that going to help me increase my sales by 80%? And if it's not, maybe it's time to not do it now or do it another time. So to get your 80%, you're going to have some kind of defining objectives to start with. And these are still very sort of visionary. They're getting more practical, but the operating objectives are the super practical actions, almost something you could write down, give to somebody you know and say, please deliver this. So to increase sales, you want to launch a new product range. To do that operationally, you then need to analyze what customers spend and what the trends are. To do your research, do the background, and then you know what product range to launch. You also need to define your online marketing strategy. It might not be in your skill set. So to do it on an operational level, you might outsource freelance social media support for blogs and content. You might need to get graphic sort of assets put together for social media, and do a content calendar. Then all of that will fit into your marketing strategy. To increase the sales, you need a pricing strategy. So is it I'm just going to sell more, or is it I'm going to sell at a higher price point and increase profitability? So it could be both. Maybe you want to broaden your supplier options for best pricing and a bit missing discounts. So you might be able to buy in bulk. You might need to have different suppliers available because of the volume that you're driving through at speed. And then lastly, delivering great customer service. So to do that operationally, maybe you want to offer packages of products or upselling to increase revenue. So when you are buying on the shop, it could be a little bit like, recommendation, or people who bought this find that it goes really well with this. And so you can start to offer that upselling and that kind of extra package or gift wrapping or something that kind of just adds a bit more. Then that can start to increase your sales because of the customer service. So again, another exercise you can do separately, and that's just to look at what do I need to do to increase sales by 80% this year. And then you break out those operating objectives, and then that starts to sort of fit into your plan, because you have a big chunk on marketing strategy, on research and product development, pricing, and then how you kind of upsell with great customer service. Okay. So I've got a question here around e-commerce channels. Is it worth having your goods on many e-commerce channels, or best to excel in only the most specific to your product? It's worth trialing them. So just test the water, see what's the lowest cost entry point for each, and see what the sort of success rate is. And again, it goes back to measuring. So what are you selling, where, how much, is it working? Then you can make a decision on, it is great, I'm going to invest more, or potentially, no, it's not worth paying the subscription fees for it, and I'm just going to come back to my kind of core, one of the core platforms. Okay, this is a really interesting question here about how do we know it's the right time to change and invest in our branding from a business plan goals, for example, a new brand name or new logo. So it's not a science, but I often find 3 years is a sort of the first point in a business where business owners will start to think, actually, I think I might need to change something. It's normally because you prove that your business works. You may have started the branding, it may be homemade, you may have got the logo and things sort of, and the website very pieced together. It served a purpose, that's fine. But now you understand who your core client base is. You don't want to change a brand name or a logo on a whim. You don't want to do it really quickly, be completely different from what you did before, unless you're actually changing the business entirely, because people will start to know you for what you do. So it's worth always having some time with, marketing and brand and design expert on things like that, because they'll try and understand what your customer base is and who you're serving and what you're trying to achieve before making any recommendations. Also, you should really do it when you are certain about what you're selling and, again, who your client base is. And if you've gone from maybe working with freelancers to actually getting lots of corporate contracts for something, you think, well, actually, I think I need to brand to suit the corporate market a bit more. So take some time on that one. Don't do it very, very quickly, but do think about your goals. Think about if you want to start selling internationally, perhaps you need to look at having a .com website instead of .co.uk or things like that. Okay, then lastly, we're going to look at how to have a backup plan. Again, another template. I did promise you lots of takeaway work to do after this. This is about growth as well as maybe sales dropping. So this isn't the doom template, but it is worth thinking about from a growth and loss perspective. So because you've been monitoring your cash flow, or you should be from now onwards, you understand what it's telling you. However, if it looks like it's going to change considerably I will, and then you fill in kind of a sentence or two about these. So if your cash flow looks like it's going to get really tight, potentially you might need to look at supplier terms as to whether you can do stage payments. Or can you start charging people a deposit for what they're buying from you? So some money's freed up earlier in the process, and then you can charge the balance later. Business costs. You know what your running costs are. You've sat down and done a budget, fixed and variable. And if they change significantly, what can you do about it? So energy costs, again, this is coming up so often for businesses. If they change significantly, is it a case of talking to your supplier? Is it a case of cutting back in other areas to keep your overheads broadly the same? Potentially, it's not having such a large storage unit, but bringing all of your products back to the spare bedroom for the time being, so you can reduce some of those costs. Profitability. Depending on products and services, it varies, but you're clear on what it should be. And if it looks to change, what will you do? Typically, those business costs will impact profitability. But if you haven't put your prices up for 2 years, maybe it's time you can put your prices up and you can decide on whether you're going to do it in stages. The reason for looking at this as well is if you do some promotion and you suddenly get a bump a month, can you service all of those orders? Can you send out all of those items? So this is also about getting a loan. It's about getting a grant. Suddenly I'm going to get another £20,000 in the business. Okay, well, what am I going to do with it sensibly? And so how am I going to make sure I'm monitoring and measuring what impact that's going to have? We look at marketing. So analysing data for the marketing activities that you do, especially time spent on money. And if the data starts to change significantly, or it's not changing as it should be following time and investment, then what will you do? Maybe you'll reduce spending on certain social media adverts, or perhaps it's working really, really well, so you're going to start to invest even more. People and HR. So your team know what to do if cover's needed. But if you work on your own, how will you cover for sickness or holidays? Can you postpone customer appointments? Or do you have a quick and easy handbook and description on how for somebody to help you send out deliveries when the orders have come in? So who's going to process them? Who's going to package them? Who's going to take them to the post office for you? So it's just working that out. If you're off sick, how can you get that cover? And then lastly, IT and systems. And this is an area that a lot of small businesses tend to hold back on. But is your business and customer information securely saved? Is it accessible from different locations? Is it saved on the cloud? Are you password protected? Things like that, even the basics. Lots of businesses don't, and they keep everything on a spreadsheet on their laptop. All it takes is one cup of tea to go over that keyboard, and potentially you've lost that information. And also customer data isn't secure. So do spend some time on having a business backup plan. Fill it in. Hopefully you won't need it. But as I said, this is also for growth. This is also looking at your cash flows suddenly going to spike because you've had a really, really good year. But then does that mean you're going to go into the VAT threshold? And so does that now mean a conversation with your accountant, sharpish? So just all of these things to consider to make sure you have a backup plan, and then keep that with your business plan, and that should help you. Okay, so questions and answers. I've had a question here around how long should a plan take to put together? Is it something worth staging so you don't go off the boil, but also so it's not overwhelming? Would you do it over days or weeks? If you can sit and set aside an afternoon, then that's brilliant. Not everybody thinks like that. Not everybody will have all the information to hand. So it might be worth looking at your an hour at a time, taking all of the headings and saying, right, I'm going to start with the big picture stuff, because that's normally quite inspirational. And once you've started there, you follow on with everything else. When you start looking at cash flow, it's a bit less exciting, in all honesty. for most people. So that might be something you just have to really dig in and make sure you've put in your diary and that you do. So it shouldn't be onerous. It shouldn't take up too much time. But I would say a decent chunky afternoon or split out into, you know, an hour a day over a week, that would be beneficial. Okay, so do put your questions into the Q&A box, and I will come to the ones that I haven't addressed. Okay, so do I have a financial modelling and financial cash flow forecast template to share? So unfortunately, I don't have a particular template because all businesses will be different. It is something you can look at on the Google. Do have a rummage online and see what's recommended, because you've got all of your outgoings and then all of your incomings, all of the income and then all of your outgoings equals, and that's your sort of balance. But in terms of modelling, you're going to want to build into it all of the bits that make your business unique. So you've got those fixed and variable costs, but then you also need to factor in your sales. So it's quite hard to come up with one template that works because every business is going to be different. But even by developing that template yourself, it'll give you that critical view of your business and you'll start to go into it and dig deeper. So it's still quite a good exercise to do. Another question around, would I recommend planning for 12 months, less or more? All of those. So you've got your 3-year plan, which is in an ideal world, this is where I'd like to get to. On that way is year 2. But right now, let's look at 12 months. If you think about this year, we're already halfway through the first month. So 2 more weeks and we've done month 1. Another 2 months, we've done quarter 1. You might do it on a calendar year, or you might do it from your financial year. So it could be April to April. I wouldn't be looking at all of the detail in years 2.5 plus, because lots will change. But the closer you are to now, the more detailed you should be. Okay, how big an influence does social media have on product sales? Is it a must-have for every business selling online? You'll definitely get more answers on the marketing webinars, but what I would suggest is you should have a presence. You don't have to be on every single platform. So who are you selling to? What's the age, demographic? How do they buy? Is it e-commerce? Because in which case you will need social media presence. You might not need Facebook. So potentially you look at Instagram and TikTok, because they're the 2 platforms that will yield the most for you. Twitter might not be relevant for you. LinkedIn might not be relevant. But then if you're looking at something that's maybe product driven, but it's much more into the sort of slightly bigger business space, maybe you want to think about LinkedIn, but not TikTok. There's no easy answer because each platform has a different purpose and a different audience. But I would say you do need a presence, but you need consistency. So if you're not really, really active on it, just do less, but make sure it's consistent. So if you're always posting something twice a week, that's absolutely fine. If you're posting 5 times a day, you have to maintain it. So you just need to make sure you're comfortable with what you're doing. Having a mentor, is it a good idea, and where would you find one? Yes, I would say yes, because that's what I do. But in terms of finding one, you may have like a peer mentor. So I have a mentor, somebody who's in a similar field to me. And it's just a good opportunity to kind of cross-share ideas and challenges and so on. There are national schemes for mentoring. Obviously, with Small Business Britain, they can point you in direction of programs. You've got some of the Help to Grow programs. I would actually start even with your local Chamber of Commerce and networking groups, because they might have ideas, and your local enterprise partnership as well. Depending where you're based, they'll often have business support schemes. You can obviously pay for mentors too, as a a contractual arrangement. But the biggest thing I would say there is to always make sure you find somebody you really trust, because it has to be an open and good a sort of high quality challenge relationship. Okay, we have a question here about, should I do a separate business plan if I have more than one business, but they're all under the same category, which is gifting, personalised items and paper flowers, etc. I would have one plan, but I would be focusing on those as different products and different income streams. So they will have a slight variation to them, but they do ultimately all sit under one business plan. If you were, these are disparate now, if you were that physiotherapist, but you also had a business on the side where you were doing personalised items and paper flowers, they're two different business plans, but you're basically doing similar categories within one business. So I'd keep it all together. Okay, if your business is growing and you're reinvesting profit to grow further, but you now need to take a small wage from the business, how can you, due to different change in circumstances, how can you keep the business growing? You'll see a dip in profit, but actually if it is your business and you're the only person taking a wage, it shouldn't feel too different. Depending how much you're having to reinvest as profit to keep it growing, does it grow or is it flat? If the income is flat, you do need to look at what do I need to do to kind of increase profitability. So that would help, I hope. Okay, we are just about to wrap up now. So thank you, everybody. As I said, I'm Emma Mills-Sheffield, independent consultant. My business is Mind Setup. You can find me on LinkedIn to follow all sorts of business tips and advice. So I'm always posting on there, so please do. And also this recording will be uploaded onto the eBay Academy. Attendees will get a link to the recording with further resources and the templates we covered today over the next few days. So do keep an eye out for that. And just before we finish, we have a code you can scan here. The next session coming up is about how to build customer loyalty. And that's on the 31st of January, so do sign up there. That is us finished. Thank you all for contributing your questions. I hope you found that useful, and do keep an eye out for those emails coming through with further links, guidance, the recording, and so on. Thank you ever so much.